What's up, beautiful image bearers? It's me, CA3, and today we're taking a look at what Paul has to say about Christian conduct in Colossians 3 and 2 through 6. So he says, devote yourselves to prayer, attend constantly to prayer, continue steadfastly in it, wait on God through prayer. Paul stresses the importance of prayer in the life of the believer as a regular devotion. It leads us to the source, which is God. But he goes on to say keeping alert in it, which means to be awake, to be watchful. We must stay on guard through prayer and make sure we don't neglect its importance as a regular practice. It seems to imply that by being in constant devotion to God through prayer, we are privy to spiritual opposition. But then he goes on to say with an attitude of thanksgiving, of gratitude, the giving of thanks. And focusing on gratitude is more important than using prayer as a tool to get what we want from God. Instead, prayer should be a tool so that God can get what he wants out of us. Thankfulness in prayer aligns us with his will instead of our own. He says praying at the same time for us as well. And same time means at once, together with, early in the morning. Paul seems to suggest that there is power in believers praying together in unity, making a discipline of it as one would do something in the early mornings. Prayer helps us to refocus our attention from the troubles of the world to the truth of God. He goes on to say that God would open up for us a door to the Word. Paul shows humility in that he realizes he needs the grace of God in order to share his gospel. Too many today twist God's words and expound on it with empty sermons and careless phrases because they are trusting in their own power to do so. Paul knew that only through God's divine power and sovereignty would doors be opened so that he could speak the truth of God's word in God's way. And that's what he goes on to talk about here. He says that we may speak forth the mystery of Christ. And this is mystery as in what is unknown to those who don't believe, the general Christian revelation of the gospel. And as we know, the gospel of Christ is foolishness to those who don't believe. Only by trusting in his guidance can we be used as instruments to make clear the mystery of his salvific work. But now Paul admonishes the reader. He says, conduct yourselves with wisdom, walk in it, make it a lifestyle. And this is divine wisdom, wisdom in spiritual things. He says toward outsiders, and it's just simply those who are outside of Christ, those without the knowledge of the truth. Basically, be gracious with unbelievers who do not see the world as you do. We can't expect the world to be so welcoming of the message of Christ. After all, it's not our words that have power, but his word as seen in Romans 1:16. He says we are to make the most of the opportunity. And this making the most phrase means to redeem, as in redeem every opportunity for Christ. It also means to buy up, as in to buy up the time. Every encounter we have with unbelievers is a chance to shine a light for Christ. Buy up as much time for Christ as possible through the words and actions in our encounters. He says, let your speech always be with grace, gracefulness, loveliness, goodwill. And now, of course, there are times for harsh truths, but there is also a time for patience and genuine goodwill, especially to those who don't know Christ. And this word grace carries a double connotation, not just from the sender, but for the receiver. This grace is a sense of thankfulness. Folks should walk away from an encounter with Christians being thankful for it, not resentful of it. He says as though seasoned with salt, salt being wit of wisdom and grace in speech. He continues on in this idea of the importance of how we speak being as important as what we speak. We should expect unbelievers to be apprehensive and sometimes hostile to the gospel, so we have to handle them with love and grace. He says, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. And as in respond, this word means in the Greek to distinguish, to separate, and to answer. And I think this makes it pretty clear that the Christian life is a thinking life. We don't just blurt out what we know, but we distinguish how to speak in each situation based on the person being spoken to. And really, this is the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge without the wisdom of how to use said knowledge is not really much good at all. A part of the Spirit's fruit is gentleness and self-control, and this must be on display. And something I want you to notice here is the parallels between where we started versus how we end. Paul is praying the same thing for the reader that he is asking for himself. And so essentially it comes full circle to the necessity of believers to pray for one another to be used by God in the right way. For us to seek God as a source of wisdom and understanding so that we can work together in unity to spread the message of Jesus Christ to the world. And what is that message? Well, I'm glad you asked. We as people could never meet the standard of God as seen in the Ten Commandments. Jesus paid the price for our sin, and through his death and resurrection, we have been made right with God again. That truly is the greatest blessing. I pray it encourages the believer, but also that these mysteries become plain to those who don't. God bless you. I love you, and peace.